advancing DEI in our workplaces. And tonight's conversation will focus on allyship, bridge building, and leading from below. And we have an extraordinary panel of leaders that are joining us tonight. And we also have a really awesome lecture by Mila Skinner, who is the founder of Quarter 5 and an awesome DEI leader in the space. And she's also one of our amazing Baumart scholars. So all of that is to come. But first, I want to turn it over to our amazing communications associate, Natalie, to introduce herself and share some exciting news with all of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie. I'm a Loyola School of Comm senior serving as a communications associate here at the Baumart Center. We are eagerly encouraging you all to connect with us on social media and throughout the whole series on LinkedIn and on Instagram. So I will be sending out weekly emails, so make sure to look out for those with graphics that you can share on your personal accounts. And whenever you're sharing anything on any of your social accounts, make sure to use the hashtag Baumart ADEI and mention either Seth or Emily on LinkedIn and tag us on Instagram. We're also raffling off a racial equity card set, and this deck of cards is for organizational leaders across sectors and it enables them to go beyond DEI in an HR context. So it's a really great set of deck of cards. So we're raffling off a couple of those. To enter the raffle, you just have to post on either Instagram or LinkedIn or both and share a quote from one of our panelists and tell us why that quote was impactful to you. The social post can be from any of our panelists from any of our sessions, including from last week. And all you have to do is tag either the Baumart Center if it's on Instagram or Seth and Emily if it's on LinkedIn. And multiple posts will be multiple entries. So you can post from every session going from here on out. And we'll be accepting posts through February 24th, and we'll be announcing the winners on March 3rd, which is the last session.
Thanks, Natalie. And do you want to also maybe share with them how they can be following on Instagram? I know we would have some awesome takeovers happening there.
Yeah, so every week we're having Instagram takeovers by participants. So make sure to check out our Instagram page. And we've been posting every single week about the participant who is doing the takeover this week. So you can learn a little bit about them beforehand, but also follow our Instagram stories to watch their experience throughout the whole series.
Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. All right, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mila Skinner, who is the founding director of Quarter 5. And Mila, I will stop sharing my screen and give you screen power here.
Well, you know, this technology stuff is more than a notion, folks. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can see my slides. I am incredibly excited to engage with you all today and just to talk to you about something that is very near and dear to my heart. It is near and dear to my life and near and dear to my work. So again, my name is Mila Skinner. I am the founder and managing partner of a firm called Quarter 5. We work with organizations as they navigate complex and consequential change. I am going to move to the next slide because I have a lot to get through in a short amount of time. I am going to ask first for you all's grace in that today I am going to do some tech with you all. And so we're going to have an interactive moment later. In order to participate in that, I'm going to need you all to do a little work with me. And so if you would go either on your phone or on your computer and go to vbox.app, you can either scan the QR code. There's like 20 different ways you can get at this. You can go to the website, you could get the app, you can scan the QR code, and you'll need to, if you don't scan the QR code, you will need to put in this ID, 189586793, and it should take you to a page that has not launched yet. I will launch it soon. Yes.
Really quickly, I'm getting messages that people are still seeing my screen and not your screen.
Ah, okay. Let me do a stop share. Thank you.
I don't think I'm sharing.
That's fascinating. Good. Who knows?
Yeah, it's like
Let's try it
100th
now.
Zoom meeting. I've never experienced this before, but
Somebody was seeing my screen, but somebody was seeing your screen. Okay, now
all right,
do you see
okay.
V-Box? Hopefully, yes, because I can't see the chat.
I'm seeing a yes.
I can't see the chat. Okay, awesome. So we're going to hope, fingers crossed. I hope this is not a sign of things to come with tech. But again, please do scan. You can use the app or the QR code, and then we are going to have a little bit of time to engage on this in a bit. Here is the information also in the chat. So I hope everyone can see it. All right, I'm going to move us, and I'm hoping folks can see. If not, I will be talking over everything. So let's jump in. We're good to go, Emily?
I'm so sorry. I'm still getting messages that they only see my screen. But some people see yours, Mila. So we chatted
It's a bear cat quote.
We chatted in the code here. So hopefully
okay,
they can
and now
still
we should be
access it.
Everybody sees the quote, hopefully. I'm going to read the quote. Okay, looks like everybody can see it. All right, so Barry Katz is someone I respect deeply who does some work with an organization that I also work at called One Goal. In a conversation with her last week, she said, if we all chose not to wait, it would happen tomorrow. And so I'd ask each of you to sit with that, because I do believe if we all chose to do something, even if it's one thing differently, to advance DEI, we could see a new world tomorrow. And so, I know there's so much going on in the chat. This whole text thing was fun. For those of you who were hoping today for a list of things to do to advance DEI in your workspace, a checkbox list, please accept my most humble apologies. That's not what you're going to get from me tonight. Instead, what I hope you get is that together we have a conversation about humanity and for what I believe DEI is about, which is humanity, and it's about love. All right, so if we talk about advancing DEI in our workplaces, when I think about this work, I think about it as what I believe is a misnomer when we talk about advancing DEI in our workplaces. I believe it's false, and I believe it's a fake question. The reason I believe this is that in the case of the DEI in our workplaces, it can't be advanced if we're not talking about DEI in our lives. If we continue to see DEI as a work product, a plan, or a tool for business success, it's always going to be something that is about weather and not about the climate. And so I want to say that again. If we keep talking about DEI as something we do in our workplaces, we are having a conversation about the weather and not about the climate. So DEI is about our humanity. It is about our collective human existence, not our work existence. It is about our wholeness. It is about our completeness, and it is about our totality. Therefore, we must stop talking about DEI as what we do in our workplaces, and we have to start talking about advancing DEI in our lives. So I want to do a humanity check. Sometimes when I'm on calls with people, I'm like, we need to pause and we need to do a humanity check. So that's what we're going to do. And because DEI is about humanity, that's where I want to start. You know, like a wellness check, people go to the doctor, like, I just need a wellness check. I need you to see how I am. That's what we're going to do. So this is about who you are. And so I'd like for each of you to take a minute, and I'd like for you to think about your identity. And your identity could be your race, could be your gender, your ethnicity, your sexuality, your physical being, your socioeconomics, etc. There are so many things that make up our identity. And I'd like for you to think about what are those pieces to you? What are the pieces that make up your identity? And it may be some combination of these things, but for a moment, sit with that. And as you think about that, I want you to think about something. Is based on your identity, have you ever experienced the feeling of being marginalized, of being stereotyped, of being othered, of being judged, of being shamed? So one more time, I want you to think about the pieces of your identity, the pieces that make up who you are, all of the pieces of you. And think about if ever in your life, whether as a kid, as an adult, that based on that identity, you ever felt marginalized, stereotyped, othered, judged, or shamed. And so now we're going to move to the interactive part of this. So I want you to start to think about those feelings that were evoked. I want you to think about what that made you feel. I want you to think about the experience and how it sat with you. Think about those words, write them down, just sit with them for a minute. If you've gone into VBOX, I'm going to then ask you you're going to have 30 seconds once I hit go. So everybody get ready. You're going to go into VBOX and you're going to, once I open this up, you're going to start putting in those words. And what I'm hoping happens is that they show up in here. I'm sorry, same thing from Emily. I'm sorry for anybody who's having tech issues. I did ask Emily if I could control this, which is probably not what we should have done, but we're working on it. So 30 seconds, I'm going to open this up for folks. So it is open. You should see that now on your VBOX app and should be putting in words. You've got 12 seconds. 6 seconds. And it just closed. So I'm sure everybody didn't get in, but I want to make sure you have those words. And so did not show up here, but this is what we will do. We will exit out of here. We will open this back up because tech loves me right now. And we will present here and go to this. So these are the words that you all shared. Moving quickly. So these are the words you all shared. Sadness, discouraged, angry, powerless, frustrated, anger showed up again, privileged, which I appreciate folks naming directly, loneliness, again, fear. So just take a minute and look at these words. These are the words that came up that people shared. So for each of you who shared something that left you hurt, I apologize. I am sorry. I am sorry because we have all experienced hurt, harms. We've all experienced othering. And for this, you experienced pain. You experienced separation. You experienced fear. You experienced loss. And I hope you are healing from that. And these words is our humanness. It is our wholeness. It is our collectiveness. We have to stop looking at DEI as issues that impact others, but that impact all of us. And these words are all of us. It is our collective humanity. It is our collective wholeness. So let's talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So the beauty of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that diversity is differing elements. So if you are all looking at the screen right now, hopefully you are seeing all of the differences and the beauty. You're seeing Black and white and Latinx. There are people who on this phone who are gay, queer, non-binary, Muslim, Christian, Jewish. There are so many of us on this call. So that is diversity. Those are the differing elements. In our storytelling, our experiences, our willingness to hear one another, to feel, connect, and seek understanding, we create the inclusion. So inclusion is about creating and maintaining space. In equity, we take the time to see each other's abilities and to see the uniqueness of those abilities, the differences, and in our own understanding of our privilege and power. Someone spoke about that in their reflection. We have an opportunity to move away from it. We have to have a willingness to move away from that power and privilege and provide space for others to create equity. So on the equity piece, this is the piece that I often hear people struggle a little bit with. And so I often say is, if you do recognize that some of your identity leads you to a place of power and privilege, how do you create and maintain space for others who may not have it? That is the surest sign of equity. And liberation is our freedom to be our whole self. So whoever you are, however you identify, I ask that we all lean into a place of liberation where we can be our whole self. And so DEI, again, it's about humanity. So I want you to, if you needed like a step-by-step, here's your step-by-step. And so I want you to think about DEI always about humanity. We have to stop thinking about it as a thing that we do at work that we just like, again, mark it off. We leaned into DEI today. So for those of you who, again, are looking for your actionable list of things, here it is. Here are some steps. Please know that no matter what, these 3 little boxes on this PowerPoint will never be enough. They are a place to start. So first, think of it as an imperative act for human existence, and therefore do your own work first. What I mean by that is look at your way of being, your way of thinking, your way of acting and interacting. Examine how you show up in the world. Examine how you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really think about that for yourself first before seeking to do the work with others. See DEI as an act of humanity and liberation. Again, humanity is about our care and our connectedness. Think about the things that bring us together, not the things that pull us further apart. And then act and acknowledge when you fall down. We all fall down. That is like the way of life. That is how we have learned. That's how we learn to walk. That's how we learn to talk. That's how we learn to do all things. And so perfection is not what we are seeking when we do work around DEI. And so I ask you not to think about it as a place of how do I do it perfectly, but instead, how do I do it and how do I name when I may not know or when I may misstep or when I'm learning, and how do I ask people to be a partner with me in that work? And so I leave you with this quote, and I leave you with this quote because it's one I heard the other day, and I'm going to read it out loud because I recognize that some folks are still having tech issues. I heard this quote from a colleague of mine, Ashley Watt, at One Goal, and it reads, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." I'm going to read that one more time. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come here, if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. The reason I share that quote with you is because we have to stop seeing this work as something that we do for someone else. Allyship matters. Yes, you cannot be an ally unless I invite you to be an ally. You have to see that your allyship is part of us all moving together, not something that you are doing for me in service. If you want to build a bridge, it is because you want to walk across that bridge with me, not for me. If you want to lead, you have to see your responsibility, not just leading from below, but leading from side to side, up, down, and across all of the lines of your life, not just in work. And so again, I say, please think of diversity, equity, and inclusion about what you do in your lives, not just what you do in your work. Take action, do something different tomorrow, because that's the only way we're going to see significant change in this space. So thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. I apologize for any tech issues that anyone faced. I am happy to come and sit down with you and do the full presentation one-on-one if you missed something, but just be patient. So thank you so much, Baumhart, Emily, Seth, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mila. And I'm so sorry for those of you who are still having tech issues. And I just want to say that I know that many of you had left the call and tried to rejoin. And I'm getting like 10 emails a second here. But if you are not officially part of advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our workplaces, which means that you did not apply for the program and you did not get a confirmation letter from us and you received this invite from a friend, if you could very kindly log off of this meeting, we're happy to share the recording with you. But because we are now at Zoom capacity, it looks like many invites were shared around for tonight's event. Our actual ADEI cohort members and participants are unable to get back into this experience. And they're the ones who really went through the application. So I'm so sorry to do that. But if you're able to log off, we are happy to share the recording with you after. And Natalie is going to send an email to everyone now sharing that information. So if you have friends who are locked out, we're getting that information out to you just in 1 second. So thank you so much for giving us grace as we're navigating the Zoom world and for all of your patience. And most importantly, thank you, Mila, for rolling with the punches and delivering a truly fantastic presentation. So I am not going to go back and share my screen as I normally would because I just want to avoid any potential problems there. But I do want to now come to our extraordinary group of panelists. So I'm going to spotlight, or Natalie, if you're able to spotlight as well, I can help you here and we'll spotlight everyone. All right. So I love the face, Mila. We're coming to you, Shalane. Coming to you, Annie. Let's see here. Am I missing anyone? No, I think this is the full group here. Okay, so we are spotlighting our panelists, and I want to come to this really exciting conversation on how we think about allyship, leading from below, and bridge building. And I want to start off with just an opening question for all of you to help our audience kind of get to know you and get to know the work that you're leading in this space. And, you know, just share a brief snapshot of your career today and how you're currently working to advance DEI in your own company. And let's start with Miss Annie Weinheimer here.
Oh man, hi guys, it's great to be with you. All right, so I started out in healthcare at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in External Affairs Department right out of college. I had always thought I wanted to be in the nonprofit sector because I was super passionate about social impact and specifically racial justice from a very young age, and believed that that's kind of where my skill set would be the most valuable. And in learning about the business side of the hospital, I was drawn more and more towards the for-profit sector and how to run and grow a company. But at the same time, I was still very deeply passionate about DEI work. And while I was doing the nonprofit focused work I envisioned myself doing, I kept wondering why we were the only ones having these conversations about equity at the hospital. Why is it that the External and Community Affairs Department continues to be the ones driving these conversations forward? Why isn't the finance department here? Why aren't operations here, etc.? So when I moved over to RSG, Ryan Specialty Group, where I'm currently at, a light bulb kind of went off that I can actually do both. I can help grow a technology startup company and be involved in business development projects, finance, operations, and I can also grow the company's diversity initiatives. And this may not seem very groundbreaking to you guys, but it was very groundbreaking to me, which is what brought me to Baumhart. I had this revelation right around the time the first cohort for Baumhart was announced. And the tagline was combining profit and purpose. And it kind of felt a little bit like divine intervention at that time. So cut to the chase, this is what I've been doing for the last 3 years. I've been growing an insurance technology startup company within a large wholesale insurance broker. I've been getting my business degree at Baumhart and getting a tailored education for how companies like mine can reimagine their core operations to include equity and sustainability, and then helping grow our DEI initiatives from the ground up. So I've been working with senior executives at my company for the last year to help build out our DEI council, launch racial equity trainings, establish an internship program that'll help us broaden our horizons in terms of what types of talent we're attracting, and developing a long-term framework for our internal and external initiatives. And what's so important to me is that I believe wholeheartedly that it cannot be the HR, CSR departments, DEI teams being the only ones talking about this stuff. I think radical change can happen in the for-profit sector, especially in your traditionally homogenous companies and industries, when we figure out a way for all departments to drive this work forward and have a vested interest in this work, which is why I love that my job description has absolutely nothing to do with DEI, and I can be a little plant in my team, in my department, to drive this work forward. So thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, Annie. Let's come to Alicia Vega.
Hi, good evening. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I started out my career working in the child welfare system, working for the Department of Children and Family Services. And a lot of the work that I've done for the past 25 years has been either through government or nonprofits, working with communities affected by trauma and violence. And also just sort of just a little tidbit, I think a lot of times I end up in spaces, even in nonprofits, where the higher up I go in levels, the less I see people like myself. So oftentimes I've ended up in sort of the executive team as the only person of color and only person who identifies as LGBT. And a lot of the work that I've done is trying to create spaces that are inclusive and are really embracing cultures different than them. And really doing, I found my work to be both sort of on the ground, working with those who are unfortunately affected by the disproportionate distribution of resources in our communities. So I've worked with a lot of young people who are living on the streets, particularly because of how they identify being pushed out by their families and communities. So sort of seeing the effects of access to services and the effects that the religious communities have to sometimes fostering a very exclusive mentality around the LGBT community. And so seeing a lot of the after effects on that. And really, I think serving a lot of time advocating for creating different spaces. And with all the love in my heart, I share that in the 1990s, when I was an undergraduate student at Loyola University, helped work with them to form the first gay and lesbian alliance at the university. And I think I learned a lot about my work as an advocate for system change to be able to be more inclusive. And so Loyola was my learning ground for that. And it's been exciting to see the amazing advancements that have happened over the past 20 years around that issue with Loyola. I currently work as the executive director for a nonprofit called Changing Worlds. The mission of Changing World is fostering inclusive communities and enhancing cross-cultural understanding using the arts. We provide programs for children from pre-kindergarten through high school. And I really see the heart of that work that we do is helping young people to learn to love and embrace themselves and all the different layers of their identity. Getting modeling for them how to love and embrace people different than them, and giving them the coping skills to combat when the world tells them to think differently, to not love themselves and love people different than them. And I honestly feel like that is the recipe for addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's all really about who we are as people and how we are socialized to act around people who are different than us, or not act around people different than us. And a lot of the work I do is really about interpersonal relationships. And I think that's really the key to this work, is to help people on a personal level understand who they are and how who they are affects how they interact in different spaces, and learning to really know how to respectfully understand people who are different than them, and embracing all of that. So a lot of the work that I've been doing since coming to Changing Worlds is really taking the model that we use with young people by using the arts to help foster our mission, And I really see it as a way to help adults as well. So we've actually recently launched a program called the Art of DEI Living. And I appreciate what was said about this is not about your workplaces. This is about how you live. And one of the projects that we're really working on is using art to help interpersonal relationships between folks in the workplace. What we've learned a lot through our work and working with our corporate partners and the work that they're doing is oftentimes our companies are diversifying their teams and then certain people of color or certain identities don't stay and they don't understand why that's happening. And I think it really is about helping people to learn to interact in a way that is respectful when you're doing the day-to-day work. And I think the real work happens when you get to understand and have a personal experience with someone around who they are and how their identity affects the way they're able to navigate the environment around them. So that's, just kind of in a nutshell, the work that I've been doing,
Thanks,
really
Alicia.
seeing things from a lens of the work. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. All right, so we'll come to brief introductions from Victor.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here virtually with all of you. My name is Victor Scotty. I'm born and raised in Chicago on the South Side, Chicago Public Schools, K through 12. I always start there when talking about equity because I think Chicago is such a unique place. It's a very racially segregated place. I think being a Black man from the South Side, I think it gave me the privilege of really being able to understand from a very early age that my community isn't monolithic, and being able to grow up within that diversity and richness of Blackness in Chicago is phenomenal, and I carry that everywhere with me. I spent 7 years at Google, so really at the intersection of HR, which we call people operations, tech, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So everything from advising employee resource groups externally or internally, external partnerships. So connecting our employee resource groups with the community and working with organizations. I think my favorite part of working at Google was doing student pipeline building. So I ran a program for HBCU students who wanted to study computer science. So really getting them into the pipeline for our engineering internships. So really, really cool and exciting work. And also did a stint of time too in our frontline HR organization. So really supporting our people partners and those core HR processes. So I think it gave me a really unique opportunity to work across the employee life cycle and really understand how DEI is or isn't embedded in those processes and and how to do that. I then moved on to West Monroe Partners, which is a consulting firm here in Chicago as an inclusion, equity, and diversity manager. So really helped with the rollout of that strategy. So it gave me an opportunity to kind of take all those different lessons from such a large place and really help implement and drive them in a different industry and in a smaller environment. And so after that experience, I've started my own company, which is called Moving Mountains. So what it is a for-profit accelerator for Black men who are seeking professional and personal alignment in corporate America. And the way that we do that is really through asset orientation and self-efficacy. So really entering into the space with the belief that we as individuals, all of us, particularly Black men for Moving Mountains, we're coming with everything that we need to be successful and to be the fullest expressions of ourselves. Things like therapy and coaching and the different learning modules that we do are really just to bring that out in a way that is authentic and unique to them. And I'm at the very early stages, but I think through my work, my hypothesis is that also placing a premium on that as a form of career development in addition to all the other supports that are already available can help with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Number one, getting that critical mass in corporate America, but also in retention as well. So it's been a really fun experience for the past year and a half to really dive deep and focus there. I got connected with the Baumhart Center, I think about, well, definitely during 2020. It feels like a lot longer in a good way, because I've
Yes.
been so impressed with all the offerings and everything that I've been able to take advantage of. So I was a member of the BSIP program, Business Society and Impact program, which helped me think a ton about capitalism and ethical business and social good, and how to really embed those things, not only, you know, in my work in the corporate space, but also within Moving Mountains. And now I'm in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Institute, which is, we're nearing the close of that, but it's been a wonderful experience as well. So really, really happy to be here with all of you, to have a great conversation, and to meet some of you.
Thanks, Victor. All right, Shalane, we'll come to you for your 2-minute or under kind of introduction to your work in DEI.
Yes, I'll keep this brief so we can actually get to the questions. So I am a media advertising director for a company called Wavemaker. My current client is the Department of Health and Human Services COVID vaccine awareness campaign. So their job is helping the client steward their advertising dollars. But similar to many of the other panelists, I've always had a passion for DEI. I launched our HBCU recruiting program at Starcom, a previous agency. Currently at Wavemaker, I work with our Black and Latinx ERG. I've also spoken up about representations on panels. I've emailed our global CEO when they're doing things I don't agree with, developed mentorship programs. And so again, really understanding that DEI doesn't just happen in HR, it really happens in the day-to-day. And I say, you know, the business moves where the money is. And so, you know, if you're really impacting profits and working in that space, I think working together, you can do a lot more. And excited to be with you all here tonight. I am also a Baumhart Scholar along with Mila and Annie. So excited to be here with my fellow cohort members.
Thanks so much, Shalane. And Mila, we've already heard a bit about your introduction, but I want to hear from you really briefly how you're approaching DEI work at Quarter 5.
Yeah, so really quickly, I mean, again, when I think about DEI work, it is about significant change. And so I often tell people, if you're looking for someone to do work that is just going to put together a plan for you, I'm probably not your girl. But if you are really invested in doing this work to make change and to kind of shape up and adjust the way in which we engage with one another, then there's probably an opportunity for us to work together. And so that is definitely how we're orienting to engaging with organizations around DEI.
Thanks so much, Mila. So I want to come to this question on leading from below. Many of the folks who are joining us in this program are, not necessarily on the executive team at their companies or organizations, but they are extremely passionate about using their power and their talents to really move the needle for DEI in those spaces. And so I want to actually come to Annie, Victor, and Shalane specifically on this question, because I know that you all have really extraordinary stories of how you have successfully kind of led from below and been a really great bridge builder in your work. And so I want to hear from you. Can you share with us, how you've successfully led from below in your own company, and what advice you might share for other leaders who are in a similar place?
Sure, I'll be happy to start. So one example is that there was an advertising industry panel, and I noticed that on the panel, there was about 50 panelists, only 2 women, no people of color. And so I emailed the conference chair about it and then elevated that to my boss. I think really important when you're leading from below is finding an advocate who can help speak for you to those higher level things, because she wasn't able to elevate it to our CEO and we were able to take action with it. Another example is, our global CEO based in the UK sent a really insensitive email. The subject line said all lives matter. So that can give you a sense of how it was. And again, because I knew I had the backing and support of my team and my company, I was able to email him directly and say, hey, this is a really insensitive email. And, he was actually really receptive to that. He actually responded. We set up time to talk. And again, I might not have had the boldness or courage to necessarily do that if I didn't know that my boss was going to back me up 100% with that. And lastly, I'll just say, starting with an idea. If you have an idea for how you can make things better, don't wait for HR or your CEO or your chief people officer to bring it. You can work on it yourself and bring it to life.
Thanks so much, Helene. Annie, how have you led this work forward in your current role at RSG?
Yeah, for me, it's just been about taking initiative. I didn't rely on others to do this work, or a certain department, or someone who's in power. I kind of want to challenge the people on the call whose jobs or majors or expertise actually has nothing to do with social impact or DEI. To me, these people can really create really impactful change because they're engaging their colleagues, their peers, to see themselves in this work where maybe they previously had not. Inequity shows up in every department, in every team, in every company, in every industry. It's just a matter of peeling back the layers and seeing how and where it shows up, and then caring enough to change it. So in terms of effective strategies, I've found it effective to go straight to the top. Go to your boss, go to your boss's boss, go to the freaking CEO and ask them questions. Don't interrogate or accuse, but just ask them what they're thinking about DEI. What do they think they could be doing better? What's the company's role? Where's the biggest need? Where do they need help? And then be that help. Many have thought about these questions. Many may not have thought about these questions. So getting them to take a step back and then think critically about these things is kind of the first step for that. And it's mutually beneficial. It's good for the employers and the employees.
I love that, Annie. And one of the things that I've heard in this work is that it is so much more effective if you approach these conversations with genuine curiosity. So if you talk to your leader and they say something about, DEI or racial equity that you don't understand or you really disagree with, it can be more effective to live in the questions than to be kind of serving as, as someone who is calling people out and trying to get them to the right place right away at the right time, but instead really like inquiring with curiosity. So thank you for sharing that. And it's been amazing to see, how you have done that at RSG and have truly, changed the conversation and changed the way that people are at least thinking about this. Victor, I want to come to you. How have you thought about leading from below and bridge building in your company?
Yeah, so I want to provide two different examples. I think piggybacking off of what's already been shared, kind of this idea of taking initiative. And I know that looks different at different companies depending on the size. So just keep in mind that Google is a very big place. But something that me and another colleague who's also a Black man that we noticed is that we were talking a lot about DEI, talking a lot about equity and intersectionality, which is great, but there wasn't any intentional focus or really organized space for Black men. And to really talk about that experience and to really explore what it's like in tech and what it's like in corporate America. And so we got together at Google, like having like email aliases are a huge thing. So we started an alias. We noticed that it was getting a lot of traction. So before we knew it, we had 100 Black men on that alias, which is phenomenal. So that's more than any of us had seen just with our own interactions, right, within the company. And then we actually started to focus on mental health and wellness. So we brought in a psychotherapist, we brought in a coach, and really began to explore and unpack together. We were blessed that we had this space right when like the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all of these things that have these murders that have happened repeatedly. But in that moment, in 2020, this extended moment, we actually had that space and community together. And I think for all of us, we really saw and understood that it was so beneficial. So that space, which is now over 400, Black men, which is phenomenal, was just started by us actually starting an alias. We didn't need any permission to do that. We actually didn't even need any budget, but we wanted to come together, in community. And that was really, really important to us. I think in terms of like different things to do, I'm all about, really mobilizing at your sphere of influence. Also for advocating up, down, and across, I think that's important. But most of us all have teams that we sit on. Some of us, might be people managers or people leaders. And so what is it, that you can do together? One of those things that I brought to a team that I was on was actually something that an old manager of mine started, and it's called DEI circles. He actually put a lot of rigor behind it, but the essence of it is for every team meeting for the first 10 minutes, and it rotates which teammate kind of brings in the material. It could be a short video clip, an article, and we actually talk about that. So we give it to folks like the day before, people consume it, whatever medium it is, and we dedicate that time to be able to talk about it. It might seem small, right? And some of the conversations might not match to exactly what we're talking about at the moment, but over time, that really builds folks' muscles and opens up the space to have those critical conversations. So unfortunately, we're living in a world and a society where more things are going to happen, where we will need to continue to create space, for folks or for ourselves. And it's always, I think, tragic to me when those spaces aren't created and there's really no entry point. But with something as simple as talking about DEI in the broadest sense or the most nuanced sense, each and every team meeting, we're able to really build that muscle and rapport with each other. And I think those things, really speak to leadership, and also, making sure that folks actually feel comfortable, to bring as much of themselves as they want to the spaces that we all occupy and work within and add value to.
Thanks so much, Victor. And I want to come to Mila and Alicia now. Alicia, you are the CEO, executive director of an awesome nonprofit. And Mila, most recently, you were the chief of staff to the CEO at a national nonprofit, One Goal. For you in those leadership positions, how did rising leaders especially come to you in ways that were really effective in terms of how they could contribute their talents to moving the needle? And so much of this is in the approach, right? And I see the chat box really blowing up here in terms of calling in versus calling out and where to kind of draw the line. But I want to hear from you, when you think about an executive team, how can rising leaders really effectively approach that team and then move forward to make an impact? And Alicia, we can start with you and then we'll come to Mila.
Sure. I think that a lot of times people have come to me with their personal experience, and I see that it's a really difficult thing for people to come and share a moment where they have felt treated poorly, not being treated fairly, and I think for me, I'm constantly just reminding people as much as I can that the door is open. That we can have these conversations. And I encourage people in any leadership position to just continuously say it over and over, that you can come to me, you can come talk to me about these things. And then when they do, oftentimes it is important to really understand how they want you to share that information. So I think, if you think about these experiences are very intimate, and sometimes we forget. I think sometimes we forget that because we're part of these big systems, and there's this corporate work that's happening, and there's these groups that are happening. But it really comes down to very intimate and personal things happening to people, and those things are hard to talk about. And I think as leaders to really remember that these are not easy things to talk about. And to really be able to understand how it's appropriate to share those stories with others or not share those stories with others. And I think it's really just important to really keep in mind the intimacy of what people are telling you, to be able to honor what they're saying and share it in a way that they feel comfortable with.
Thanks, Alicia. Mila, what advice do you have for folks when they're kind of coming to their executive teams?
Yeah, so it's a couple things. One is I appreciate everybody in the chat. It's incredibly helpful to see where folks are entering the space. One, I think that we've again created this dichotomy of something must be wrong in order for me to say something. That we all know that this work matters, that doing this has to happen. It is a moral and human imperative for our collective existence. And I need us to all grasp that. And so what I find often, which is sometimes not helpful, is everybody's waiting for something to be wrong. They're waiting for the gotcha moment. They're waiting for the you didn't do this and you didn't do that, as opposed to starting to think from the beginning to the end of what do we want to be true? And how do we start to advance that now before we wait for something to be wrong? something is already wrong, folks. If no one knew, something is already wrong. And so how do we start addressing that now before the like gotcha moment? I also want to name something that came up in the chat that was incredibly helpful about like who's doing the calling in, right? I say this often, with call in with love and not call out with hate and anger. And why that matters to me is because I can't, and this came up in the chat, I can't carry that burden all the time. As a Black woman, I am tired. And I'm not tired just because I'm doing the work to call people in. I'm tired because being a Black woman is incredibly hard in this country. And so I need people who see it, who know something's wrong, like Annie talked about. Annie has that, but she doesn't have to do what she's choosing to do. She does it because she knows it matters. And so when you think again about allyship, what is your responsibility to be the voice before someone who is hurt or harmed gets hurt or harmed? Because we've already been hurt or harmed. And so if you know that, you have access to that information, what are you doing ahead of time versus waiting for the like, see, gotcha, I told you, you all weren't thinking about Black people or Latinx, or there wasn't a non-binary doctor. So I would just ask that people think early and often and not just wait.
Thanks, Mila. And I love what you said in terms of who's doing the calling in. And one distinction I have personally loved between allyship and bridge building is that allyship might look like me as a straight woman, going to Pride and celebrating that day with folks, whereas bridge building would look like me as a straight woman talking to other straight people, heterosexual folks, about what they need to be doing to really be advocates to folks who identify as LGBTQ, right? And it's the same thing, right? As an Asian American woman, for me, I can stand as an ally with Mila, with Shalane, with Victor, and with my Black peers, but it is even more compelling for me to actually be a bridge builder and go back to my AAPI community and even the white community to say, hey, this is what we need to be doing for Black folks if we are truly going to be advocates. And so there's kind of a difference between sitting in allyship versus really actively bridge building. And I think that work is often missed. So thank you for raising
Emily, can I just say one thing, because there's a distinction that I want to make. There's a difference between what you do for Black people or anybody else and what you do with, right? Like, again, my hope is not that you do something for me. I'm hoping you do something for us, that your existence is better because you are doing something that is going to make our wholeness, that is going to make us all great together. Because again, no one on this call, no matter how they're showing up, is asking for anyone to do anything for them. They are saying that we must do this together. I have my responsibility and you have yours.
Yeah, and it is not a zero-sum game, right? It's
Absolutely.
We all benefit from this work, and that's why we should be doing it. So thank you, Mila. All right, I want to come to your questions now. So Natalie, what questions have you received in the chat?
The first question I have is from Holly Brooker. Holly, if you're still here and if you wanted to ask your question.
All right. Oh, I think I have it on. Hi. So my name is Hallie Booker. I am a budding DEI professional at my job and learning to explain exactly, Milo, some of the points you've been making around centering the humanity through all of our work, so that what we do aligns with your personal values, and you start to really see the change in who you are, and then carry that forward in your other spaces. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you, especially you and Shalane, is how do you deal with the fatigue that kind of comes with doing this work, and often with calling in order to be respectful of others, right? Having to kind of closet how you may feel about certain things.
I'll start. Is that okay, Mila? So one thing I will say is, I take breaks from it. I give myself grace to say, like, this week, I need a break from it. I'll step away. I remember one thing we actually set up is the company and agency after last summer, they were doing all these like safe rooms and safe spaces. And we actually set up, or I set up personally, I call it an unsafe space. And it was a place for me and other Black women just to get together and just to kind of talk and share with each other. And I found that was really healing and really kind of help kind of just release and share. And then the other piece I will say is, if you can, like, don't do it alone, and bringing people with you to help share that burden, and also giving yourself grace to say that you don't have to solve everything. And so, I see a lot of injustices in advertising, and I've chosen to focus on a couple, a few right now. And I find that also helps me not get as burnt out with it. About you, Mila?
Girl, I'm tired. That's my answer. My world has always been surrounded by people who are incredibly different from me. I am so privileged, so richly rewarded, and I won't sleep. I won't sleep. I won't take a break because I can't, because I'm raising a Black boy, and I refuse to. I think the thing that's most exhausting for me, and this is where, again, I ask for you all support, allyship, partnership, bridge building, etc., is, and this is just what I want to offer to you all, is living in the city of Chicago, when the city was open, I would often, because of my diverse network of friends, go to the North Side to have dinner and drinks. And in the city, I could still walk into a restaurant and be the only person of color, not just Black woman, but the only person of color in Chicago on the North Side. And that is exhausting. That part is exhausting. I could talk about this all day. Y'all let me talk about DEI. We'll talk about it all day long. But it is exhausting to be okay walking into spaces and still being the only face. And so that is why I do say, like, the response, I want each of my white friends to be like, we're going to a different restaurant. Let's go to the South Side. Let's go to Hyde Park. Like, that's what I want. That's what community looks like for me. So I'm happy to have the conversation. What I need is for folks to, like, get tired with me.
Other questions, Natalie, that we have in the chat from our participants?
Yeah, the next question comes from Laura Trejo. Laura, if you're still here and want to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. My question was specifically about strategies that somebody might employ. And hi, Mila, so good to see you. I work at a really small organization. We are a whole 5 people. And so, we don't have the capacity to form employee groups, right? I am the only person of color. And so talking from that perspective is incredibly difficult in the workspace. So I would just be curious to know, in small environments, what are maybe some strategies that we could employ?
I feel like I start every question, but I always have lots of ideas. What I would say is, if you are in a smaller industry or smaller office, looking at industry events. So, I have connected with people who are at small, like, independent advertising agencies where they are the only woman, only person of color, only Black, and that's all in one. But while connecting with others in your network, that can sometimes, I feel like, help you to branch out. Or even like within this institute, hopefully you're making connections and able to build that way as a start. And then as far as making change, I think, again, it's where it goes, like, it shouldn't all be on you, right? It's like Mila said, like, we want to do this with us and doing it together. And so don't feel like you have to lead the charge because you happen to be the only woman of color there. Find others to bring along with you.
Thanks, Shalene. Other panelists, advice for working at small companies or organizations and moving the work forward?
I can comment on that. Most of the spaces that I've worked in have been nonprofit spaces, and sometimes nonprofits have small teams of folks. I think I had mentioned earlier that I've often just found myself, particularly as I advanced in the nonprofits, that I became the only person of color in that group. And I think being able to really I think bringing in different kinds of activities or experiences that maybe all people can kind of relate to. I think finding ways to really advocate for some interpersonal relationship kind of activities to happen for people to get to kind of know each other's experiences, and also try to bring like the whole person into the space. I don't know what your role is on the team. Do you want to share like what your position is, or what level of work that you do on your small group?
Yeah, definitely. Probably adding even more layers of complication. I'm a program officer at a family foundation. And so our board leadership will be what it is until folks die off. That's how that goes, right, on a family foundation. And we are a really small team. And so while I am in a position that certainly has some decision-making power, it is quite challenging knowing that I am in a very different place of understanding than at least a couple of my colleagues.
Right. So are you the sole program officer?
There are two of us,
Okay.
and the other is a senior program officer.
Okay. So I don't know, what population that the foundation is serving, but I think trying to bring in, some of the dynamics of what is it, the work that they're trying to do to try to impact the communities, and trying to bring in some of that DEI lens, if they're truly looking to make an impact, and kind of not really knowing what the population that you're serving. I think trying to bring it in from that lens, to talk about how DEI can really advance whatever the mission is for the foundation. I know it's particularly family foundations, it's a little hard. There's a lot of different kinds of culture dynamics that you're really up against. So I can appreciate the difficulty you have making changes at family foundations are definitely extremely difficult.
Thanks so much, Alicia. And I'm seeing here in the chat, Vina saying the hierarchy of even smaller organizations of just 4 to 5 people can be truly oppressive. And in my last role, it was a team of about 20 people, and I was trying to move our work forward for DEI, and it was very challenging. And one of the things that I use, Laura, if it's helpful to at least have meaningful conversation, was about the power of leveraging the diversity of our team. So instead of talking about leveraging diversity, period, it was about leveraging the diversity that was in that space and thinking about all the unique experiences that we all brought into that room, and trying to understand the conversation from the perspective of just, yes, we're a small team, but like, how can we leverage this diversity? And then how can we carry that across now to talk about the most marginalized populations, and think about who isn't in that room, what type of diversity is not representative, and how could we be even more innovative if we could leverage additional lenses in just our team. So hopefully that's some level of support, but mainly just a note of empathy there, Laura, that it can be really difficult. Awesome. Okay, any other ideas from the panel in terms of how you might navigate this at a smaller organization?
I would add, I'm looking at the chat, and I think Neil made a really good point, kind of like question, comment about boundaries, and that triggered a comment for me, because I don't have experience in super small organizations, which is why I was quiet. But that's what I was thinking. And honestly, no matter the size of the organization, I think that's important. Like, I think for me, what I've learned is like one of the best methods of self-care that I can provide, being Black, being queer, in corporate America, in these spaces, is saying like, no, thank you. I don't want to serve on this committee. I don't want to do anything extra, right now with the employee resource group. I'm actually, just going to do my work and like whatever else I choose to do, right? And that could change tomorrow, that could change, 2 months from now, but like that, like I have that power, to say that, and to honestly to lend my talent, in that space, especially if it's outside of my core role. So I just want to double down on that, because I think boundaries are so important. I would imagine, especially in smaller organizations, especially if you're, one of the only folks of color, And I can only imagine, being a woman of color, and talking, to friends and colleagues who identify that way. I think that's such a good point.
Thanks so much, Victor. And yes, boundaries are important. And I love what Neil just chatted in here. The quote just says, no, it's a complete sentence, right? It's okay to say no. And Mila said, protect your peace. Okay, I think we have time for just one more question. So Natalie, do we have another question from our participants tonight?
Yeah, the next question is from Brielle Lisa. Brielle, if you want to unmute yourself to ask your question.
Hi, everyone. My question is about specifically Black and Asian American allyship, but then like broadening it to all people of color with like with the anti-Asian violence that the Asian American community has been experiencing within the pandemic, and then especially this past week. I'm just thinking through like, what does it look like to not have that like zero sum mindset or like a limited piece of the pie mindset when it comes to like specifically, yeah, Asian Americans and Black folks being allies for one another?
I can kick this one off just really quickly. I've heard people talk about the oppression Olympics, right? Like, is your oppression greater than mine? Is mine greater than yours? Like, it's hard. Like, the reality is that there is a dominant culture. We all know what the dominant culture is. And if you are not part of that dominant culture, you are outside. And therefore, there are times when you are going to be in a role where you need to support your Black brothers and sisters. You need to support your gay, queer brothers and sisters. You need to support your Asian brothers and sisters. Wherever you're showing up, like, we all got to stop thinking that like my oppression is greater than your oppression. There are things about being a Black woman that are far more oppressive than other races. There are other things, like I forget sometimes about being able-bodied, right? And that is because that is my privilege. I am able-bodied and I am privileged because of it. And so what is my responsibility to ensure that my brothers and sisters that are not able-bodied have access to the things that they need? And so I would just say, like, let us all lean into how, that is why I asked earlier in the conversation, like, what about your identity has created a space for you where you have felt outside? And what would you have wanted someone to do for you in that moment to welcome you in? And so take that moment, sit in that hurt and harm and that separation and that anxiety, and think about, what do you need to be different, and provide that to someone else who feels othered or who is outside. Again, we have got to stop pushing away from each other and start leaning into one another.
Thank you so much, Mila, for that beautiful response, and Brielle for the question. And I resonate with that. As an Asian American woman, it's something that you can't escape right now on social media, just the violence against our community. And I think Mila spoke to it beautifully, right? Again, this is about humanity. It's not the zero-sum game or a limited pie, right? It's about how can we all thrive together. And the reality is, white supremacy can exist when we don't do that, right? When we start to not work together and say, Black folks versus Asian folks, our struggles are different, obviously. But if we don't come together in that struggle and in that experience of being steeped in white supremacy our entire lives, white supremacy will continue to exist. So I just want to say thank you for your question. We are at time now for breakout rooms. So I want to say a huge thank you to our extraordinary panel for joining us this evening, for sharing their insights on allyship, bridge building, and leading from below. And thank all of you for all of the really awesome engagement in the chat rooms. We now want to give you the opportunity to connect with each other and just kind of reflect on the conversation and what you might bring back to your workplace. So the first question for you all is, what from this discussion are you planning to bring back to your community in conversation or in action? And the second question is, where have you really seen successful allyship, bridge building, and leading from below in your own professional experiences? So those are your two questions. We'll chat them in once you get into your breakout rooms, but you should get an invite in just one moment from Natalie to join your breakout room. Thanks, Natalie. All right, everyone, we'll see you in just 20 minutes here. Enjoy your breakout rooms.